let's begin. Cool. All right. So today we have Polly McKie, and she's here to discuss a little bit about her own acting career and her marketing and promotion techniques that she uses, and even her own program that she's kind of put together to help actors with all of that stuff. So yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. I'm very excited, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. So yeah, let's start off, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your acting career. How did you get into acting, and what would you say are one or two of your biggest accomplishments so far?
Sure. So I wanted to go into the business when I was younger, as a teenager, but for various life reasons I didn't. And I went into teaching instead. So I taught high school drama for 11 years, and then I was involved in some community theatre, and I think the bug just never leaves you if you have it in you. Mm-hmm. And I definitely have it in me. So I gave up teaching, and I made the either terrible decision or bold decision, I'm not sure which, to move to New York, knowing nobody, knowing nothing, and came here as an F1 student, so on a foreign visa, to study acting. And I studied full-time for 2 years at HB Studio, and the bug was definitely there, and I wanted to stay. And that's when I started looking into trying to get a visa to work here, which is a long and arduous task, but it's been absolutely worth it. As far as accomplishments, I think a huge thing for me was getting my green card as an actor. And a very good friend of mine, who is also an actress, is an expert at that, and she helped me get my green card. And that meant that I was allowed to work. And then, I guess, booking my first off-Broadway gig, which was very exciting, with the Mint Theatre. And then the other biggest accomplishment is the Steven Soderbergh movie that I just did quite recently, called Unsane, where I play a nurse opposite Claire Foy from The Crown. So that was pretty exciting.
Nice. That's awesome. Getting the green card, that whole thing is, a lot of people who are living in the United States don't understand what kind of accomplishment that is. But
right.
It's insane, and it's amazing. A lot of actors, when I ask them, like, what are one of their biggest accomplishments or things that they say that they're most proud of, many of them, especially if they're from other parts of the country, say, like, being able to move to New York to pursue acting and stuff. So, like, just kind of getting in and getting things started. If you have something that's like that level of, I've moved to New York, or I've traveled from a different part of the world, and I'm making things happen, you have that level of accomplishment behind you. Sometimes I think it's good to just kind of think back on that and be like, I've already accomplished this much. That means that I'm capable to do a lot more.
Yeah. And it certainly wasn't easy or quick, and I think that's one of the big things that in this business that we have to remember. We're in it for the long haul. People say, how did you book the Soderbergh movie? Well, that was 6 years of building a relationship with a casting director. It doesn't happen overnight for most people.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually leading into this next question, which is, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about that film and how connecting with that casting director, like, what was your process and how did you actually make that happen? You said it took like a number of years, so yeah.
Sure. Okay. So actually, there's a wonderful person who every actor should take her class, Heidi Marshall, who is an on-camera teacher. And in fact, it's related to the green card, because I'm definitely much more of a theatre actor. But because of the barriers with the green card, I wasn't allowed to join Equity, the Actors Union for stage acting. But SAG is slightly more flexible with that. So I decided to take a camera class, and she knew the casting director, Carmen Cuba, who's out in LA, and she cast Stranger Things. She casts a lot of Soderbergh stuff. And I was up for a small role in, well, actually, I read for several small roles, you know, those kind of things where they call them, you know, bandaged victim or scary patient, all of those kind of things, random titles. And I read on tape for Carmen Cuba, and I got a call back, and I went to the call back in person, and she said, what's your immigration status? And I told her, and I wasn't in the union, and she said, it's too much paperwork for us to hire you. It's not worth it for some small role. So, but obviously she had liked me and liked my work. So I kept in touch with her. For example, I'll send a postcard every so often, or when she cast Stranger Things, I sent her a congratulations. And I think that's one of the big things I teach about is actors, we tend to be up, please hire me, look at me. You know, it's all about sending out our photo. And I think the big thing to do is to be a real human being. So casting directors are people too. So when she has had these great achievements, I've sent her congratulations. So yeah, then the Soderbergh thing came up, and I got an email asking me to submit, and I put myself on tape, and I got hired. So, but that was six years later. And at the end of the shoot, I said to Soderbergh, because it was a very small, low budget thing, he shot the whole movie on an iPhone, which is kind of incredible. So he was very much there and part of it. And at the end of the shoot, I went to thank him. And I told him the story about Carmen, and I said, and obviously she's very good at her job because she remembered me. And I told him the whole story about auditioning 6 years previously. And I said, and she remembered me, and he gave me a hug and said, I'm so glad that she did. So that's a pretty good top lifetime moment.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it is so important. I actually just had an interview a little while ago with Ian Hersey, another actor who actually also does coaching for actors. And we were talking about the whole thing about, you know, being appreciative of others and remembering others and kind of, you know, doing what we can to help others. And whether it's something like congratulating them for their own accomplishments and not keeping the focus on yourself, or even like giving back, like he was talking about how he was helping with teaching acting for free to people in a prison. There's all different ways that we can give back and, you know, help others out, and that's what's the best, I think.
Right. And I genuinely don't think of it as a competition. And I mean, in fact, I've been up for parts with friends, and you just laugh. It's not, especially, we're all so different, and there are so many factors that can actually be liberating for an actor. What's helped me with disappointments and not booking things is that it's so many factors that are out of our control. You can go in and do your absolutely best work and be the best actor, but that doesn't always mean you're going to get the job.
Yeah, exactly. So I would like now to just talk a little bit about some general things that you tend to do on a daily or a weekly basis to get paid acting work. Like, how do you promote or market yourself?
Social media. Can you get a sigh in my voice? I have a kind of love-hate relationship with that world, but I do think it's very important. And in fact, I have booked work through Facebook. I'm shooting a short film tomorrow that somebody posted that they were looking for this particular thing. Someone sent it to me. I emailed them. I've never even met the people, and they booked me for the job. So sometimes, although it can be a false network, because people post things that aren't necessarily, you know, the most. People post exaggerations, I think. You know, everyone's life looks perfect on Facebook and Instagram. So I did actually, I started a thing that I found really motivating. I think because there's so many ups and downs in this business, so that the periods when actors are resting, as we like to say, I think that's when you have to be your most proactive, because the danger of depression setting in, not wanting to do things, feeling disheartened. So I started a thing with my teaching and my coaching with the Actor's Friend, with a hashtag 100 days in the life of the actor. And I did it for 100 days, and I encouraged other people to do it. And it was posting something every day on social media with a photograph, saying one thing proactive that you're doing for your career. So that it could be as simple as mailing out a headshot, writing a thank you note, anything proactive. And I found it motivates me so much. And because I was reading it, I had to do it every day. And now the 100 days was over. I did it, a couple of years ago, but I still use that hashtag and try to be. And it can be simple things. It doesn't even need to be directly connected to acting. It can be taking yourself for a walk.
Yeah.
Sorry, have I lost you?
Oh, no. Can you hear me? I just said,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I started that, and students did it, and I don't think it's an accident. I booked more work while I was doing that. I think if you have a positive mindset, it not only does it help you, I think it comes through in the room.
Yeah. No, that's
so recently I was a reader for audition, so I got to see from the other side of the table, and it was fascinating, an energy that people can bring into a room. So it's so much more than just the audition.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Does that make sense?
It's yeah, basically it sounds like, by focusing on those positive things and how you're moving your career forward, you're keeping yourself, in a sense, almost in a grateful state, as opposed to like a scarcity mindset where you're like worried 100%. About everything. And that makes you perform better in your auditions and makes you more confident to talk to people and everything. And it just changes the whole trajectory of where you're going if you can keep it up. And it's really cool.
Absolutely. And I think that from my background, being Scottish, we're certainly not. We're not raised to show off, or we're raised to be modest. And I think I used to have a bad habit of when I wasn't working and people asking. Because it's a very sensitive thing that actors have. That people talk about it. They go home for Thanksgiving and everyone's like, "Oh, what are you doing? What have you done?" And I think I had a bad habit of going, "Oh, nothing. I'm not doing anything. I'm unemployed." And now I think. A lot of it actually has to do with the green card. I had to switch my mindset to say, "No, this was really a big deal. I did this, and it was a positive thing."
Yeah.
I had to promote myself in the application as I am a successful actor.
That's interesting. So you kind of like were forced into it, and then you kind of got used to doing it, and then it built a habit.
Now that doesn't mean I don't want people to think that, well, hey, everything's perfect. It doesn't mean I don't have my demons.
Yeah.
But I think I'm very aware that negative things in my life have helped me as an actor too. So I look back and I'm actually quite grateful for life experience. So although for a while I was kind of bitter about not going into the business when I was younger, but I think it would have eaten me alive then. There's something about coming into it in my 30s that I had a life behind me that I can use as my tools for my acting.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, that's the right mindset for those types of things, because you have so many different things that, like you said, are completely out of control in the acting industry and just in general life. And I feel like it's the duty of pretty much everybody, anyone who's working for themselves or doing like freelance stuff like acting work and everything. It's their job to take whatever happens and figure out a way to use it to their advantage, rather than be like, oh, this happened to me. It's like, how can I use this? There is something in most things that you can use.
And another thing that comes up so often in my class, people will ask me questions, and so much is, be a human being, be a decent human being, and don't be an asshole, and you're going to work more.
Yeah, no, that's
People
true.
want to work with someone people want to work with someone who's going to be fun, who's not going to bring a toxic energy into the room. And it's amazing how you can see that in 2 minutes in a person.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, I feel like most people who are, very, very successful in their careers, they were either born into it or they were very nice. It's rare that someone becomes successful if they're also like an asshole,
Yes. I think there are a few, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's definitely a few, but there's like most of those people.
I definitely
were born.
know. I know examples of people who have lost work because of not being a nice person.
Yeah.
I won't tell you any of those stories.
No, that's fine. I want to move into talking a little bit about your goals now, if you don't mind. What would you say are like one or two of your biggest goals in your acting career, or like what are the things that you're currently most excited to move towards, and what steps are you taking right now to achieve those goals?
Sure. It does sound like a cliche, but I just want to work as an actress, and it's not. I'm not hugely ambitious. I'm certainly not interested in being famous. Mm-hmm. I would love. I've done 4 off-Broadway contracts now, and I love working off-Broadway. There's so much real quality work because it's less commercial. It's not commercial like Broadway. Obviously, I would love to do a Broadway show at some point, and I'm definitely working more towards getting some more film and TV. And that's something that I would say with the Soderbergh movie, a lot of people just assumed that all of a sudden everything would be, I'd suddenly get all this work. And that didn't happen. And I think that's what you have to be careful with too, that the assumption that if you get one thing, suddenly it's going to fix everything in your career. And that hasn't happened. But I definitely use my clips from Unsane and promote that. And, for example, my email signature has my reel and has that I was in that. And I used that to reach out to representation because I actually struggled to get an agent. I have a manager now. That's not been an easy road, but I think that is something too that I teach. That even if you get an agent or a manager, I think so many actors think, oh, if I had an agent, I would get work. Mm-hmm. But you have to do the work. If the casting directors don't know you, the casting directors are the real key to me, and that's what I teach, is how to build relationships with them, because they actually don't really care if you have an agent or not. If they like you, they're going to call you in.
Yeah.
So I really try to keep on top of that, and there's a brilliant website called Casting About, and I've built a relationship with the owners of that. It's run by Breakdown Services. If any of this is foreign, then just ask me to explain. But Casting About, it costs, I think it's just under $50 a year, and it shows you who is casting everything. Mm-hmm. So and it's like an online notebook. So how I use it is when I've met a casting director, I will write a little note on this site, and it stores it for me. So if I get called in again, because sometimes you don't get called in for, years in Carmen Cuba's case, and so you can go back and remind yourself of what the audition was, how the relationship was, what happened, and that's a great tool. And then it's also, you can print labels, so if you're sending out a mass mailing, so if I'm in a play, obviously I will invite all these casting directors to come and see it. Things like that. So it's about showing that you're working and inviting people to come and see your work and telling them about what you've done. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely...
I'm scared that I digress from your question.
No, I mean, the main question was, again, it was sort of related back to your goals, but I mean, I was just going to kind of ask a side question before we move on to the next part. But just like you said that you built up a relationship with some of the people from Casting About and Breakdown Services, which, you know, most actors know what they are. If they don't, I mean, Breakdown Services, and they're all sort of similar. Breakdown Services, I believe, can only be, or can more so be accessed by just the agents, but they're similar to, like, you know, just where all the different projects
it's
are
Actors
posted.
Access. They own Actors Access.
Yeah.
So Actors Access, yes, agents can submit. How it happens is certain breakdowns are just released to agents, which is why a lot of actors struggle to get in for film and TV.
Yes.
But then they will also release breakdowns to actors. So if it's something really specific that might be harder to get, they'll release it to everybody, the public. That
Okay.
makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So my question related to that is just in terms of, you said that you built up relationships with these people who are in these places, and so some actors might actually be wondering, like, how do you actually go about building a relationship with somebody that's in a high position? What's your recommendations?
It's a very, very good question. So the simplest way, although I do struggle with the idea of actors paying for things, because it tends to be the actors who are struggling who have to pay the most. Like Meryl Streep doesn't have to, you know, you know what I mean. She doesn't have to take a class to meet a casting director. But there are classes. So there are several places. There's the Actors Launchpad. There's the Network. There's One-on-One. There's I'm trying to think off the top of my head, Actors Connection, where you can pay to take a class and meet a casting director. And years ago, when I knew nothing and nobody, that's kind of how I started. So I met Camille Hickman, who casts for Lincoln Center, and I met Judy Bowman, who cast me in something at my first off-Broadway contract. So a lot of casting directors, if they're very good at their job, they remember you, but of course they're meeting thousands of actors. So I think it was Michael Casara who said that it takes him on average maybe 4 or 5 meetings with an actor to really remember them. So if you're lucky, I tend to be lucky that people remember me, but I think that's partly just my personality and maybe the fact that I'm Scottish. I don't know, but I've been lucky with it. But there are other ways you can, without paying. So you can go to EPAs and be seen, and quite often that will be an assistant, but then suddenly, 5 years down the line, that assistant is then a casting director. So I don't think any of it does any harm. And then there's also every 6 months or so, I think, or maybe every year, but it varies. There's a wonderful event called Meals for Monologues, and actors, you take, canned goods or dry foods, and you donate it, and in turn, all these casting directors and agents donate their time, and you go in and audition for a panel, and it's another way to get to meet them. And then the follow-up is the thing. So after you've met the person, it's about reminding them of who you are. So different casting directors like different things. Some casting directors like postcards or snail mail. Other casting directors like email. Some like Facebook. It depends. And I think there's definitely a thing about following all these casting directors on social media. So not necessarily I wouldn't suggest that you make friends with a casting director that you don't know. One casting director said to me, her rule of thumb is, don't be my Facebook friend unless we would go out for a drink. And I thought that was quite a good way to analyse it. And some people are more private than others. But if it's public and you can follow them without friending them necessarily. So I do have several that are friends now on Facebook. But that's, again, taking time of building up. But the idea of just reaching out, or again, what I was talking about earlier, that look at them and what they like congratulate them, or comment on their tweet, or like their Instagram, and you're paying attention and getting to know them as a person as well as them getting to know you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's definitely, it's really important to build those relationships in a natural way. You know, you don't want to keep on hounding the person, but you also really need to have something, like you said, to make you sort of stand out. Otherwise, you won't be memorable. So in your case, maybe it's the fact that you're, you have a Scottish accent, or, I mean, basically for you, because I would guess, again, that it's related to the accent because it's less common. And so when someone meets someone with an accent, it's kind of like, oh, I think that I remember you, or it's easier to remember. And lots of actors, they don't have a way to kind of stand out or separate themselves, or some sort of unique brand.
Although I will say that for several auditions, I pretend I'm American, so that doesn't work. But yeah.
Well, I think that that's, really important, and that kind of leads into the next question, which is just, what would you say are, maybe 1, 2, 3 top tips that you could give to an actor who struggles to get called back after auditioning?
To get called back, did you say?
Yeah, if they struggle to get callbacks, they're always going out for auditions and they struggle.
Okay. I think the key, first top tip is you should be absolutely 100% prepared. That sounds so obvious, but it's amazing how many people are not prepared. And when I say prepared, I'm talking about everything. So obviously, if it's a theatre audition, read the whole play. Again, this all sounds obvious, but it's astonishing how many people don't. You should know what is happening to your character, not just in the 2 pages of audition slides that you get. You should know the whole arc of the person because you're portraying that person. I do things like I plan my outfit the day before. I try to walk to an audition if I can to clear my head, and it helps me learn the sides. You should really be, although you still hold the paper, you should have memorized the sides if possible. Sometimes they give you 12 pages and that's not possible, but if it's a short scene, you really should know it inside out. I would also say that in the room, the reader is your friend, so they're your scene partner, so be nice to them and try and make sure that you focus on them, because nerves kick in. So I think sometimes if you have a reader, that can make it more grounded and you just really focus on that person as if you're having this real conversation in real life. Another thing that I saw people do that I thought was so smart when I was reading for the auditions, an actor came in, really friendly, laid back, great energy, and the director said to him, "Do you have any questions before you read?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I've got lots of questions, but let me just try it and then we can talk about it after." And he basically, very cleverly, and it wasn't aggressive, he negotiated that he got to do it again with an adjustment, which is what you want, because you want them to see that you can take direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah, really smart, right? I'd never thought about it. I thought, wow, this guy's clever. That's a great idea. And then I think really don't beat yourself up if you don't get a call back. It's not, there's so many things that are out of your control. And this is the other thing that I say. You're never auditioning for just one job. So my story about Steven Soderbergh shows that with Carmen Cuba, that I had already auditioned for her 6 years before. And then for years, sorry, there's sirens.
That's okay.
God bless New York. I love it. The other story that I have related to that about not auditioning for one job, when I first moved here, everybody, it became a running joke. Like, you should go and work at Irish Rep, because lots of people assume I'm Irish. And I said, that's like saying to someone, you should go and be on Broadway. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. I can't control that. But obviously I went to EPAs for Irish Rep. I auditioned, and Debbie Brown is their casting director, and I invited her to my first off-Broadway show, And she came, and at the end, she was very complimentary, and I said to her, "Oh, I've auditioned for you before, but you never cast me." And she said, "Well, that's our mistake," and laughed. And then the next job that I was right for, I sent her an email, and I said, "I'd love to come in and read for this," and I booked the job. And Charlotte Moore, who is the artistic director at Irish Rep, who I'd met several times, but obviously I didn't book any of the work. And on my opening night card, she said, "How did it take us so long to find you?" Which was so lovely. But at the same time, I'd been there, but I'd just been consistently going, but it took time. And then a year later, Charlotte Moore offered me another job at Irish Rep without me even having to audition. So it's just about being persistent. One of my students called me the poster child for tenacity, which I love.
Yeah. I mean that
because you just have to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an option.
Yeah.
And then these successes can happen.
No, that's totally true. But of course,
Austin Pendleton. Do you know who I mean by Austin Pendleton?
What's that? Sorry.
You know who Austin Pendleton is?
I don't think so. I have to look.
Google him. He is Austin Pendleton is he works all the time, and he was my first teacher, and he gave me my first off-Broadway gig. So he's very special in my life. And he tells a story that he auditioned for Ron Howard for something and didn't book it, and 9 years later he got a straight offer for A Beautiful Mind from Ron Howard. 9 years later. And you think, oh man, do I have to wait 9 years? But you know what? I think you can choose to find that depressing, or you can choose to find that encouraging, and I choose to find it encouraging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that leads to a side question, which is just, I'm going to have to ask this, and it's a two-part question. A lot of actors...
That makes it sound ominous. I have to ask.
Well, it might be a challenging question, but a lot of actors will hear all of this stuff. I mean, there's so many good bits of information that people are getting from some of the interviews that I've done and some of the information that I have on my site. And I'm someone who's all about systematizing things to make it as easy as possible to both remember and actually get done. So my question is, do you have ways of systematizing your networking and sort of like making it not feel so overwhelming with like the number of people, and how do you like remember who to reach out to and all of that?
Right. Well, as I said earlier, I use Casting About because they've got a system where you can use notes. And in fact, you can look on the site and get a sneak peek without having to join. So I use that. I'm also a great fan of writing lists. So I've got notebooks with lists and lists of people. What I tell my students, though, is I think it can be overwhelming. So if you're just starting out and you don't know any casting directors, or you know one or two, I give them homework to, so say they take my class, and then I say, over the next 2 weeks, look at 3 to 5 casting directors that you think you should target. Now, the ways to go about that is either thinking about ones that you have met, but also you can look up who is cast. So if you know you're right for Hamilton, or you're right for whatever, a TV show, Blue Bloods, you look up who is casting those shows and come up with your target list, but keep it a small list so that it's doable. Because I think what happens so often with lots of actors, and I've been guilty of it, is that you give yourself too much, and then it's overwhelming and you don't do any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
And then,
go ahead.
And then in the Casting About, for example, I'll write invited this person to come and see me. They came, or they didn't come, or things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool.
So I make a note. I mean, back in the old days before Casting About, I did it in an old school notebook, but having it online I find is much easier. And, I don't have to scroll back. I can just click on the specific casting director's name and see when I met them and what it was for.
Yeah. And you had mentioned about all of the homework basically to do before every audition, like, to read through the entire script. Some actors might be thinking like, well, I go out for so many auditions, how am I going to have time to do that? And for that, like, would you recommend that people be more selective with auditions, or is there any way that like, should they continue going to all the different auditions that they're doing and read all of the scripts? What are your thoughts?
Yes. I think, well, here's the thing. It doesn't take that long to read a play. I find that I maybe will go and sit outside and give myself the discipline of, right, I've got 2 hours, I'm going to sit and read this. Yes, the thing is, I think you can be, the more successful you are, the more selective you can be. But when you're first starting out, I really kind of approve of saying yes to most things, because that's how you get yourself out there, and you never know what one thing is going to lead to another. I am probably more selective now. My manager sent me out for a play, and I read the play. I went to the audition. I hated the play, and then he sent me another message saying that another theatre was doing the same play, and I said no. So, we have to have some kind of joy in the work. I'm not really giving you a yes or no answer to this. I do believe in going with your gut. I have done some things that weren't good experiences, and I've learned from that. I think if you're talking about film and TV, there are certain alarm bells sometimes that even in the submission, you can tell that maybe it's not professional. I would just say read everything and be very, very careful. It's amazing to me how many actors don't read the breakdown thoroughly, and really you need to know everything. So, for example, a friend of mine who didn't read a breakdown and went in, and she was 5 inches too tall for what they had specifically asked for, and then you're just giving yourself a bad reputation for not knowing what you're going in for.
Totally. I mean,
does that make
it makes a lot of sense. It sounds to me like what your recommendation is towards the beginning of the actor's career, that they're a little bit more open to trying all different things and going out for things, but being selective, of course, with making sure that the projects you're going for are like actually like real projects and not like scams or something really unprofessional.
Right.
And then as you start to...
And the thing is, sorry, carry on.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, as you start to book more work and your career starts picking up a little bit, then you start to become more and more and more selective. You hone in on your brand, and you figure out the types and roles that you're perfect for. And you put all that work in, where you read the full script and do all the background homework. You even read about the director to know what he might be looking for, all of that.
Absolutely. And that's just made me think of another tip. That Google is your friend. You should beforehand Google who the director is, Google who the casting director is, and if you don't know the names, check, because the whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is true. This business is actually remarkably small, and so this film I booked tomorrow that I'm doing, it turns out that the assistant director knows me and gave a great recommendation. I've never met her. I only know her through social media. So it's just, everybody knows somebody in this business, so that's why it's especially important not to be an asshole as well. But work can breed work. So, for example, there is some great non-union stuff that happens with passionate people, and you can get together with your friends and make your own work. That's a huge thing now. When you look at high maintenance, Broad City, all of these things started with just friends who decided to make their own work. So you can do that too. And then it's so much easier to be in touch with a casting director or an agent when you're doing something, because you're able to say, I am in this.
Yeah.
I'm actively doing something.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I mean, you mentioned like getting in touch with an agent and all of that, which kind of leads into my next question, which is just What would be your advice for an actor either looking to get an agent or a manager? How would they, if they're not sure exactly what to do or they've been looking for someone for a while, what would you tell them?
It's hard. I'll say that first. I think the best way is to look at your friends first. So for quite a long while, every actor I met, I would ask them, who is your agent? And then for me, what I did when I did Unsane was I looked up on IMDb who represented the actors who had this a kind of similar level of part as I had in it, because I thought they'll have seen the movie and I can reach out to them and say, I see you represent so-and-so, here's my stuff. So I think that's the first thing, is to talk to your friends who have agents and managers and see if they'll recommend you. The second thing is to research actors. A big thing that happened for me was, we already have her type, or we don't need another middle-aged white woman. And I think the business, you've got to look and see you can see on IMDb who they represent, and if you're similar to someone they have, they're probably not going to take you on. Just, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And another way to meet them is some accept online submissions, some accept snail mail. You just have to do your research and look at actors that you admire, or maybe actors who are at your level of where they're working. Because obviously, if you're just starting out, unless there's something very specific, the chances of you getting a big agency are small. So look at what level that you're at and pitch yourself. And the other thing is, they want to know who you know. So you should be so I had a meeting with an agency, and the big things were to be able to say, I know these casting directors, I know these directors, these are the parts I'm right for.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that I'm like a young Jane Howdyshell, or a young Margot Martindale, or a young Anne Dowd. Those are the kind of parts that I am right for, and it's knowing your type and knowing who you are as a person and what your skill set is. So also be honest, don't say I can play the piano when you can't.
All right, so my next question is just, out of all the things that you've done over time as an actor, what would you say are one or two things that you think have been the most helpful in moving your acting career forward?
Taking class. I think you always need to be on your game. Mm-hmm. I still go to a singing class every week. I host an open mic and I sing at that every week, and that definitely helps me keep. It's like going to the gym. I'm so sorry. Can you just remind me the question?
Yeah, well, just what one or two top things that you've done have been most helpful in moving your career forward?
Okay. And then definitely the whole thing about keeping in touch with casting directors. I've given you examples of actually booking work from that. And also, it's astonishing that it can be kind of frightening that people put you in a box. So the number of times, because I do a lot of straight plays, the number of times people are surprised that I sing. So it's things like that you should have. You have to put that kind of out there. Now that can mean having clips. This is a big thing. A reel is people still have reels, but because it can show range. But what casting directors are saying now is it's about being brief. So here's one of the big things that I teach is, as an actor, think of yourself as the casting director's assistant. How are you going to help them? So you help them by telling them that you're the person for the part. And how you do that, so for example, on a submission on Actors Access, you pick a clip that is right for the role that you're submitting for. And the very important thing is that you write a good cover note. So you basically tell them in as short a way as possible that you are this, Scottish spinster type, for example. or what you can do, and you tell them by using the breakdown, and you use the words of the breakdown, and it helps them. Because the big thing, they get thousands of submissions and they don't have a lot of time. So it's about showing them as quickly as possible that you're right for the part. So that's been huge for me, learning about writing the cover notes, and it has helped me get more auditions, definitely. I also think, don't be afraid. You know, people are, oh, what if I submit for this and I don't? What's the harm? They're going to delete the email. They're not going to open your submission. Be bold. And if you know somebody who knows somebody, don't be afraid to ask, can you get me in for this? All that someone can say is no. But if they say yes, then you're going to get an audition. So that's the important thing.
Yeah, I love that. It's excellent advice. So thank you. My second, or I guess mostly final question is just in terms of general advice. If you had to give some advice to an actor who feels like they're stuck in their career, what would it be? And is there anything that an actor should like avoid doing?
Okay. I think nowadays online presence is really paramount. You know, and I've said this before, like, you know, Meryl Streep doesn't need a website, but you do. You should have a website, you should have clips on that, you should have your resume, all of those things. You should certainly be on Actors Access. You need to be out there. People, one of the first questions I ask in one of my workshops is, do you know what happens if somebody Googles you? I happen to be lucky that no one else is called Polly McKie. But you want the professional things to come up first. So you want your website to come up, not your, not something that's about your social life. But the other thing I think is that you also have to show that you're a real human being and not just an actor. So on my social media, of course, I try to promote myself, but I also show my real life, show my nieces and nephews and all of those things, because they want to work with a real human being, not some plastic actor. Mm-hmm. Things not to do, I think this is huge, and I see it so often. Just really try not to be negative on Facebook or social media in general. The number of people that I see, and they'll say, and this is something that happens to be a lot. So I post if I go and see something at theatre. I think it's important to be out there and see art, because that's another great way. You look at who cast play, and you can send them an email saying, or a postcard saying, I just saw this play. What a brilliant cast, congratulations. And the same for seeing a movie. But the negativity thing, so sometimes I'll post if I've seen something, and if I haven't liked it and someone asks me how was it, I'm not going to answer that in public, because you don't know. You don't know. It's like the 10-minute rule. When you leave a theatre, you don't talk about anything until you're safely at a distance. And I just think, try not to be negative in general on there by complaining. People don't want to work with someone who has that negative energy. So for me, that's a big thing. Try not to be negative or a downer on social media.
Yeah, there's a statistic that says that I think 92% of people who are hiring somebody, so that would be casting directors or just regular like employers for companies, use social media and look at people's social media profiles during the hiring process. And like you're saying, I mean, you never know. Either if you post some stuff that shows you in like an either a position of doing something that's not like appropriate or not like friendly or whatever, or even like you're saying something negative about a production, if that casting director who you just saw is looking at you and they see that you just said something bad about a production they were involved in.
Right, exactly. And don't get me wrong, it's tempting, but save those conversations for when you go for a drink with your friends.
Totally. Yeah, that's really, really excellent advice. So is there anything else that you'd like to finish up by saying? And in addition to that, I'd also like you to just briefly tell us a little bit more about the Actor's Friend program that you have.
Sure. So I think the takeaway from all of this is just try to keep your spirits up. Have one of my other tips is to plan something fun to do after an audition, because I think it can be so. I sometimes go and see a movie or something that I have to switch my phone off so that I'm not constantly checking. And I think that we just have to support each other and remember that it's difficult, but we are also lucky enough to be doing what we love. There's a passion, and I feel very passionately about helping other actors too, which is why I started the Actor's Friend. I get excited when people take my class and I give them these tools. It's about, I can't wave a magic wand and make you book a movie, but I can give them tools to help them to get into the room. And that's what brings me joy. And I find it really helps me too. Because when I teach the class, I get motivated and I see things like, I'll tell them, oh, you need to label your clips differently. And then I think, oh, I need to do that on my side too. So it motivates me to practice what I preach. And then when and it happens, I'll get a text from a student or an email saying that they got an audition because of using something that I've taught them. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, honestly, that's pretty much it for the interview. We, on behalf of everybody listening to this, and definitely on behalf of myself, I really want to thank you. It was really, really nice to hear the perspective of somebody who actually teaches actors some of these things and how to connect with casting directors and all of that. There's a ton of really, really helpful information in this. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right.